Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Okay, from Monday Night Rugby, we're joined by Fiona Hayes. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Joe. How are you getting on?
Very well. And also a guest who says he will only join us whenever Ulster win at the RDS. So here he is. Darren, hello.
Joe, I actually need to clarify that I agreed to come on here on Thursday, and that was when we all thought that Ulster were going to ship 50 points, so it's good that you actually brought that up early.
Cave thought he was coming on for a good hatchet job on Ulster, and now here he is having to be positive about things. I'm literally just scrumpling up my page of excuses, and all I can see written down now in my notes is fluke. The pandemic hasn't given us much, but your moustache is one of the few positives, I think.
Fiona's already commented on how much she liked it. She said, how much money have you raised for November? Yes, for about 18 or 20 months, Joe, and it's a midlife crisis.
Well, listen, there are worse things. So, Fiona, I had thought that rugby discussions centering around COVID were behind us, and yet here we are. So back with a bang, unfortunately, over the last couple of days. Suddenly the word Omicron, I've used it more in the last 2 days than in my entire life. So the news today, Monday, is that the Munster squad has been cleared to travel home, bar one member of the party who has COVID and then one close contact. So of the 34-person party, 32 will travel home. The weekend that was, if you weren't following the various machinations of all this, Munster and Scarlets travelled to Cape Town on the Saturday night with a view to getting on a charter flight with Cardiff and Zebre on the Sunday morning. There was a round of PCR testing though, and one Munster positive came back and then two Cardiff positives came back. Certainly one of them was reported to be an Omicron variant. So Cardiff stayed on, Munster stayed on, and at least Munster are getting home now. URC have cancelled the Bulls and Lions games for Munster, these 2 weekends cancelled. So look, it is by a distance not the most important aspect of the pandemic or the Omicron development, but for the competition, this is a disaster.
Yeah, that's it. It is a disaster. I mean, they were all going out there. We're how long are we talking about how are the South African teams going to play differently in South Africa? We were excited what they were going to bring when they landed at home, and I guess we're not going to see it for a little bit now. And I would imagine poor old Munster, everyone over there, I think the bags were even on the plane. There was images of just, they were on their way home, and all of a sudden nobody knew what was happening. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but for rugby, and especially with the South African side in the tournament, it's a real kick in the guts at the minute.
So it seems, certainly, I mean, listening to the various politicians, and things change all the time, for the next 3 weeks, give or take, whilst more is discovered about the Omicron variant, then there's going to be a real emphasis on borders being closed and limitations on travel into the new year. Who knows where it will be? Obviously, there's already Omicron cases here in Ireland, so maybe things will be relaxed if it becomes the predominant variant. Again, this is language I didn't think would ever be coming out of my mouth 18 months ago, but this is the way we're all talking now. I suppose in the short term, Darren, Munster, even if they were to get back tomorrow, Stephen Donnelly, Minister for Health, says quarantining regardless of status. So they would have to do their 10 days in quarantine. So even if they got back tomorrow and got straight into quarantine, then they would be out on Friday the 10th, and they would be due to play Wasps in Coventry on the 12th. Now, I suspect quarantine doesn't mean you can go out and train for 2 hours a day. So I would think their European match, the first one certainly on the 12th against Wasps, is in major danger now.
Yeah, and despite me, Joe, being a self-proclaimed expert of everything, if we focus on the rugby, like as you are doing now, like the implications are huge. Those European fixtures, it's hard to see how that's going to happen. And you feel like it's going to drag on a lot further. And it's a real shame because we had a bit of a shambles of a Champions Cup last year with points being awarded willy-nilly. And what is probably the best club competition in the world. It was a real shame. And there's no real time for those fixtures to be replayed. Add on the implications of it feels like there might be a bit more of this to happen. I know the Scarlets, actually, I heard through the grapevine, they're actually in Belfast. They're actually isolating in Belfast at the minute. They have to stay there for 10 days. And so big question marks over European Cup fixtures, over Christmas derbies. So, jokes aside, there are bigger implications for COVID-19. But from a rugby point of view, it's starting to become a real mess again, and that's a shame.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all develops, obviously, and I think you've both alluded to it. It's really down the list of important things, but in the context of these competitions trying to continue with a bit of integrity, there aren't many gap weeks for cancelled games or postponed games to be squeezed into. So we will see how it all plays out. As of yet, EPCR have said there's no word on those games being cancelled, the Munster Wasps one or the Scarlets one. So again, we'll have to see how it all plays out. Let's turn to the rugby that did happen. Leinster 10, Ulster 20. Darren, what was your genuine expectation here ahead of this game at the RDS? Ulster had only ever won once in their history at the RDS in 2013. So what were you looking at?
I thought, given Ulster had the poor result against Connacht, then a month off was probably the worst time for that. I didn't expect the game to be that close. I suppose at the end it wasn't, but I expected it to be the other way around. I think the thing with Leinster is, and I don't think as a player, I don't think people sort of on the outside realise when you go to play Leinster, the team selection really doesn't matter. I said this on commentary at the time. There was times I went down to play Leinster and I wondered, were you better off actually getting Johnny Sexton, Guy Ringrose, Rob Kearney et al, because you might get them on a bad night when they're not up for it. When you get the guys that are fighting for contracts, fighting for places, that's when you can actually get yourself in trouble. So my honest belief was that was going to happen to Ulster the other night. It didn't matter a dicky for me that Leinster were missing, ex-players who had beaten the All Blacks. I fully expected Ulster to struggle, and I think, from a Leinster point of view, they'll be very disappointed with how they played. But I think a lot of credit has to go for Ulster for the pressure that they put Leinster under.
So what aspect of the game surprised you the most?
I thought I felt like Ulster came in with against Connacht. I felt like Ulster, from a player point of view, they played poorly, but from a coaching point of view, I really questioned their plan. What were they actually trying to achieve on both sides of the ball? Some of their defensive organisation, the Connacht attack was great, and there were 2 intercepts, yes, but I just thought they were dreadful. I thought it was the polar opposite against Leinster. They had a really good game plan, which involved when they had the ball. They were very pragmatic with the ball. They didn't get if you saw it at the ground, they were very, very narrow. Leinster are really known for filling the field and being very hard to get around with their line speed, and Ulster didn't try to. They played into the middle, kept the passes really short and kept changing direction and held on to the ball. As the game went on, I actually thought Ulster got a couple of decisions from the referee, but you need that if you're going to beat Leinster. But also Leinster gave away a lot of penalties. They lost their discipline. They were massively frustrated with Ulster, and it brought out the worst in Leinster. On the other side of the ball, I think the plan was to just flirt with the offside line all night and absolutely try and obliterate Leinster. And again, they did it. They forced them into mistakes. You look at the Hume try at the end when Leinster were chasing the game. So it was a very simple but well-executed game plan.
On the Leinster poor discipline point, Fiona, I mean, Leinster were not at their best, and yet when they got it back to 10 points apiece on 62, 63 minutes, I think most of us would have said, well, we've seen this movie before, we know how this ends. And yet, like, for example, at 10-10, Frank Murphy is screaming at Max Deegan to let go of a leg in the maul, and he couldn't help himself when he lifts the leg in the maul, and Nathan Doak comes on and makes it 13-10. And then a few moments later, I think 75th minute, Adam Byrne gets caught at the breakdown, and to be fair, it was more good play from Rod Little, but it was yet another Leinster penalty. So they definitely contributed to their own downfall in lots of ways. You could tell Leo Cullen was not impressed with their breakdown work either, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at that back row that started with Leinster. I mean, it was a really good back row. You had like Levy, Penny, Ruddock. I was expecting a monster battle back there, But I think Timoney McCann came out on top. They were out physical. I think there was a lot of uncharacteristic errors by Leinster, but especially around that breakdown area. That Max Deegan thing was probably the most frustrating thing as any coach that you could clearly hear Frank Murphy talking about it. I know there was 15 penalties against Leinster. I know people question it after the game, but fair play to Leo Cullen. He came out and said, we'll look at ourselves first. And I really, really do think they need to do that, because he put the onus back in the players. As we know, there's no A games this year. guys are going to get chances. It's going to be once in a blue moon when you get out on a pitch if you're one of those fringe players, and it's guys didn't stand up and take their chance for that Leinster team, and he really put it back on the players, and it was really good to see. I imagine there will be a big backlash from them after this.
Yeah, he really did. So some of his quotes afterwards, this is Leo Cullen. This was all said in a very calm way, but the words themselves. So he said, Fiona, this was a kick in the backside for us. There's a lot of hype about this team. We need to make sure we don't listen to any of that. And then he was talking, you mentioned the physical stakes. We have to make sure the edge is always there. It's still man against man in the contact area. And then on the broader point, he was saying, look, when you mix up the team, it's great for competition for places, but obviously you risk losing cohesion. So he said of the players who come in, when a group doesn't deliver, then in many ways, sometimes that's their chance gone. That's the harsh reality. Some guys need to face that for sure. Now, that's a little glimpse, I think, Fiona, of how that performance will be received.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, as you said, he's very calm in how he speaks, and I suppose he was just disappointed. He gave these guys a chance he wanted to see, and as a coach, being out physicaled and out muscled at the breakdown, carrying into contact incorrectly. I mean, we spoke at the start of the season. I remember the first game Leinster played, saying their footwork in that contact area, and that would be coached them how they were getting past the gain line nearly in most carries, and we definitely didn't see that on Saturday night, and that's really disappointing to him, and he put the onus completely back on his players, and he said, guys, some of you have had a chance, now we're going to have to look, because as Darren said, I mean, you can put out any Leinster squad, like we've seen it, they've put out different guys from the academy are mixed in the mix, and it's normally the same things we see week in, week out in that contact area, and we just didn't see it on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, Darren, the excuse, and I suppose it is an excuse I'm about to make for Leinster, you could equally make it for Ulster, but in a sense you have a bunch of players here who haven't played in several weeks. Maybe training was a bit monotonous and it was a little bit hard to get going, and there's a degree of maybe rust that sets in, and Ulster had that wobble against Dragons and then responded brilliantly. You would kind of anticipate this is just another wobble. Maybe they find it all too easy and they'll respond again. I don't know. It's hard to, when you're not inside the camp, it's hard to understand where that kind of a performance comes from.
From a Leinster point of view, I actually often wonder how they select the team, because there must be a little bit of just gut feeling, and I wonder, does Leo just throw darts over his shoulder and see how they land on? Because Fiona's point about the back row, I had completely, because November went so well, I had actually completely forgotten about Will Connors. And it was only when I saw him on the bench, and I thought, and then he got man of the match in one of the Six Nations games earlier in this year. So listen, I liked Leo's interview. I definitely think a couple of decisions went Ulster's way, but I don't like when coaches come out and blame that, because as you guys say, okay, listen, there was a couple of 50-50 calls for sure, of course there was, and as I said, you need luck to beat Leinster, particularly in the RDS, but there was also 12 penalties that were stupid and were born out of frustration that put in from Ulster, how well Ulster played. So I like that Leo did that. I think from the big picture, that was a blip, and I think getting some manners put on you every now and again is a good thing, and it won't be nice for Leinster that it was Ulster and it was at home, but getting a bit up the backside is the best thing for you. Look at what happened to Ulster against Connacht, and I think one of the things that surprises me about Leinster the most, of all the superlatives and all the things you can compliment them on, it is how often they come out and play like that. It always amazed me, like, there was time, teams just don't play well 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks in a row, and they always manage to do it. And it's so rare they have a blip like this. So I don't think, and listen, I still fully expect them to finish top of the table, and I fully expect them to be the favourites to win the final when they probably get there, and I think they'll be thereabouts in Europe. So getting a bit up the backside, albeit at home to Ulster, it's probably the best thing for them, to be honest.
Yeah, it's maybe just more costly for the individuals who won't get as many chances now, given the nature of the season. And Leo Cullen's words about, well, this was your chance for a lot of them, loom large, I would think. And Leinster absentees for this game: Ronan Kelleher, James Ryan, Ryan Baird, Cian Healy, Jack Conan, Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, Jameson Gibson-Park, Johnny Sexton, Gary Ringrose, James Lowe, Hugo Keenan. I think they're going to be okay, Fiona.
Never heard of it. Joe. Any good?
Who are they? Never heard of them.
I mean, that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and you missed Andrew Porter as well.
Who? you know.
Did you miss Andrew Porter?
I did. I did. I missed Andrew Porter as well.
Yeah, I don't rate him either, Joe. He's one of the best loose head in the Northern Hemisphere.
Look, they say he has a chance. I don't know. By the way, just on Harry Byrne, I seem to be the Harry Byrne jinx. Anytime I'm there, he seems to get injured in the warm-up or not quite perform or have a great day. So I was just kind of curious. He came on maybe 65 minutes for Ross Byrne. Yeah, it was 65 minutes. The game was at 10 points apiece. This isn't I have major concerns over Harry Byrne, but just maybe there's games you'd love to see him do a bit more at this stage, because it was keeping a close eye on him. Kicked out in the full early on where he was outside the 22. Another moment where Leinster were on the attack and he was kind of around the edge and Adam Byrne was outside him and he tried to kick it through and kicked it out in the full as well. And 77th minute, this was Leinster's last real chance off a line out to kind of get things going. Look, maybe player alongside him overran the line a touch, but it wasn't the most sympathetic pass either, and ball was dropped. What did you see from Harry Byrne, Darren? I'm curious your thoughts maybe generally on him.
So I haven't seen. There seems to be a huge hype about him from. Listen, I've seen him play. I haven't seen him week in, week out like most people have who follow Leinster religiously. I actually completely agree with you, Joe, with regards to the weekend. I think it ended up being a costly call for Leinster. My perception of the Byrne brothers is that Ross is so just so good at his job that it's almost boring, and that Harry has a wee bit of magic dust about him. And I felt at the time, even as an Ulster fan, I felt at the time that Leinster, their process was coming good. And at 10-all, I fully thought that that Leinster, if they kept what they were doing, were going to go on and win the game. And I do actually wonder if that change in particular, and then, we hate the phrase, but forcing it came to mind with Harry Byrne, and the example of that we chipped through. And I just wonder, did that change, and is he more likely to try and pull a rabbit out of a hat? Can he do things from an X factor point of view that Ross can't? But ultimately, when it comes to sticking to a plan, if Ross had stayed on, it felt like at 10-all Leinster had the momentum and were on the way to winning 2010 themselves. So listen, what do I know, Joe? But that was the way I saw it.
Well, I guess, X Factor is great and you want to encourage it, but I guess it needs to come off from time to time as well, and especially when the game is the melting pot like that. Are we being a touch harsh here, Fiona? Everybody who's anybody says this guy's the one, and the one really to succeed Johnny along with Joey Carby. But on the evidence of that 20 minutes, you'd say, God, there's a bit to go yet.
Yeah, I think it's tiny margins, and I think it's lack of game time for me when I'm watching him. I mean, he does have that X factor. We've seen it in parts, but it's been such a long layoff for these guys. He's gotten injured a couple of times. He's been taken off straight away. He's up with the Irish lads. You know what I mean? We didn't really see him, so I suppose we're all talking about the X factor, but we're not seeing enough. But I just think it's game with Johnny ahead of him. His brother, as Darren said, is a safer bet. I know he plays deeper than him. I mean, I love the way he plays on the gain line. That's what I love to see. I love that X factor, that carrying, that putting guys away. So we know Harry's safer. So I think it's just getting more experience, those tiny margins. The more game time he gets, I think we'll start seeing paying that off. But playing on the Leinster squad with Johnny Sexton, his brother on it, how much game time is he going to get? That's the other question.
Yeah. So listen, enough about Leinster, Darren. Let's talk Ulster. Let's talk. Come on, this is who cares?
Have we mentioned Ulster yet?
Barely. This has been very much Leinster's loss as opposed to Ulster's wins so far. For Ulster now, 6 games into the URC, they've won 5. The Connacht slip up from their perspective, and Dan McFarlane's comments afterwards told their own story, was unbelievably frustrating. They've been stewing on that for a number of weeks. This win to get back to 5 wins in 6 has a real back on track dynamic to it now. This kind of sets Ulster up. What have you made of them over these, not so much this game, but over the previous 5? Where did you think they were?
I wouldn't say critical of them. Very much jury's out. I didn't think they played that well in the first 4 games. I know they had 20 points and bonus points everywhere. I really wasn't that impressed, and I thought some of the opposition was really poor. And then when they played like that against Connacht, I thought, we saw what Connacht look capable of on Friday. When Connacht get going, they are a force to be reckoned with. But I wouldn't say concerned. I was aware Ulster have a very tough fixture list coming up, as do a lot of teams. Away to Leinster, then I think they're away to the Ospreys, into Europe, 3 interpros and back to Europe. So that's about 10 games. So to start that block of games well is really, really good for them. And I suppose I have to hold my hands up. I definitely didn't think they were capable of beating Leinster. And it puts them in a strong place now. It gives them a bit of momentum, and suddenly things change very quickly in rugby, and suddenly they're probably not that scared of going to the Ospreys, and then there'll be you might even see a bit of a rotation for next week going into Europe, and 3 derbies over Christmas, and hopefully these games all happen. But I think they're in quite a good place. I think they'll be very happy with that result, and pretty happy overall.
Because I've seen a lot of their games this season, and I agree with you on the opposition, so it was hard to get too excited. Nathan Doak coming in and performing well was one of the bright spots, I suppose. But what jumped out to me, and you'd know obviously far better than me, but you would often associate Ulster over the past couple of years, and even under McFarland as well, for sure, with like scoring some great tries and some great backline play, and yet it never looked to me like it was really running all that smoothly, or they were expressing themselves, or things were overly in sync. And I guess even at the RDS, they didn't try and do anything too fancy. It wasn't the most creative display, as you mentioned. They were just keeping the ball at times. So their backline doesn't look to have really fired yet, or caught fire yet.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there definitely is more to come from them, and I would totally agree with you. They were getting 4 tries in those first games, but it just felt like after every game, it was the missed opportunities that were sticking in your mind. And again, with regard to the Leinster performance, I feel like if Ulster had gone down and tried to play Leinster's way, they'd have lost. So part of the actual the discipline to that performance is saying we're actually not going to. And Ulster do like to play the same way as Leinster; they're just not as good at it. So it's one of those ones where you go down and don't play Leinster at Leinster's game. So listen, there is more to come from them, I think. I still think, listen, they don't have the depth of Leinster, so a few injuries and a few players missing really does affect them. It's not like Leinster where you forget that Sean Cronin hasn't retired and someone, your 4th choice hooker pops on the bench with 75 caps, and guys like Ed Byrne and James Tracy are flicking in out of nowhere who have 5 or 10 caps. They're not like that. So I think there is more to come from them, and I hope there is too.
Dan McFarland, Fiona, so he's been coach for 92 matches now. This is his 58th win. He was asked, where does this rank? He said, it's pretty big. There are not many teams that come to Dublin and win. It's pretty big. What answer do you want? An order? Okay, yeah, it's the biggest. There you go. Is everybody happy? And all the headline writers said, yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And Dan McFarland, biggest win in my career was duly the headline. So for him, it's massive, because he was fuming after the Connacht slip-up.
Yeah, it's a big thing for him, and as a coach, for obviously they had time to stew in that. They obviously worked in certain areas, and for them to come back and get this win is huge for him. As Darren said, they're not electric in the back line at the minute. It's not firing. I mean, we were talking about last season. Last time we were playing about Michael Lowry. We haven't seen enough of him on the ball. Nathan Doak, to me, is absolutely so exciting watching him play. But imagine him coming on and you have Cooney on before him. And that's what we saw at the RDS. They had a bit of depth on the bench. We saw Marcus Ray come on as well, put in 17 tackles. They just seem to click on the day. But it's definitely a game plan that he had. Not exciting, but the continuity of play, how they held on to the ball, how they're disciplined. They worked Frank Murphy. They knew exactly what they were doing when they were flirting with that offside line. I mean, it was really, really good. A really good performance. Obviously, a lot more in them, but I think they should be very, very happy with their physicality. And I think against Connacht, he was a bit disappointed.
Yeah, it was almost akin to Leo Cullen's frustrations with Leinster. Sorry, I don't know if you can still hear us, Fiona. Your line went a touch. We'll see how it goes in the next second. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, sponsors of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. Fiona Hayes and Darren Cave with us. Dan McFarland was a quote machine, by the way, on Saturday evening, Darren. So he was talking about this stage of the season, and as you said, the next couple of games are tough. He says, we've now entered the meaty part of the season. 4 derbies, 4 European games, Ospreys away, Big Dwayne Peel coming back for the 10th game. If rounds 1 to 5 were the starter, this is definitely the main course, and that's going to decide the dessert. And again, headline writers are like, Dan, you just keep on giving. But it was Nick Timoney where he had some interesting points as well. Nick Timoney had a really big game. Everybody's waiting for Mewlan's arrival. He said, though, for a while, Nick has been a good player who's hovered around doing some good things in games, but over the last 12 months he's made a conscious personal decision that he's going to grab his personal development by the scruff of the neck and say, look, I've got to make more impact in the game. I've got to do more. I can't just do good stuff. I've got to actually impact the game. So he has seen a big change in Timoney over the last year or so. That's, you know, it's going to be a fairly tasty back row in a couple of weeks' time for Ulster.
Yeah, and I think like Timoney's played a lot of 6 and 8 for Ulster as well. So I wonder, is the reason we've seen him at 7 so much this year because Dan now sees him as, you know, slipping in there when Vermeulen arrives. And I have been impressed with him as well. I mean, he's obviously from Blackrock, but he's been up at Ulster for he's probably been up about 5 years now. He's been there a while, and it was always his speed. Like, I always knew how quick he was, and I'd always seen him in the loose. What's impressed me about him this year is I do think he's got another sort of layer of physicality. He just seems to be, he doesn't look much bigger, but he seems to be doing a lot of damage at the contact area. And, you know, that Irish back row at the minute is clean. Like, it's potluck who plays, and the fact that he's in it, show with you look at the players that aren't there, it shows the quality of him. So it's great to see players like him coming through and doing well. And you know, as I said, hopefully there's more to come from him as well. And hopefully when I do think, and what was one thing that surprised me about Ulster's performance so much at the weekend was the physicality, because I do think that's the area where Ulster, I still think it is the area where Ulster may come undone at the very, very top level. I watched those autumn games, and I just look in particular Porter, Kelleher and Furlong, and you've Cian Healy on the bench, and that's an Irish international front row, but it's also a Leinster. And I just thought, you know, they're wrecking balls. Yeah,
and so I'm kind of curious. You'd have such a good feel for this. You think the Rocky Elsom impact, say in 2009 for Leinster. Now, I guess the supporting cast there is pretty awesome as well. But kind of Vermeulen coming in, does that how much does that tilt the scales to make Ulster able to compete with the physicality at the upper echelons of the club game? Like, is one player of his calibre enough, or is it more the sum of all your parts?
It's a bit of both, but I do think when Marcel Coetzee left, the over-reliance that Ulster maybe already had on the likes of Ian Henderson and Stuart McCluskey was made a little bigger. So listen, it's a lot easier if you have 15 mutants, or at least 8, but I feel like having that extra one in the back row, it's just somebody who, when you lose your way, you know, can get you a gain line. And rugby, the most complicated game in the world, but also the most simple. And I think Ian Henderson's a good example. Having watched him come through from when he was in school, when people run into him, he knocks them backwards, and when he runs into somebody, he knocks them backwards. And you know, when you're in control, when you're able to control a gain line like that, it makes you a huge asset to the team. So the more players you have that, when everything goes wrong, can get you going forward, it's absolute gold dust. And despite Leinster's reputation over the past 10 or 15 years as being like a very pretty team that play really, like, they are actually the most brutal team, certainly in the British and Irish Isles. Yeah.
One last one on Ulster, and then we'll talk Connacht before the end. What is the ceiling for Nathan Doak? I'm gonna underestimate how long you're retired and overestimate his age. You never did any crossover whatsoever, did you?
No, just other than the stories you're probably all fed up hearing now about him. How obviously he was Neil Doak's son, and I remember him being. I played when he was the mascot, and I played when he was the ball boy, and I played when he used to catch balls, a kicking practice for the lads.
Right. Okay. And so then he's been coming a long time.
Yeah, and he was one of those players who, when they come through the schools game, everyone was talking about him. And I think, listen, he's a good player, as are there lots of good players. The one thing for me that stands above, head and shoulders for him, he just plays older than his years. I thought it was unbelievable show of faith that Dan McFarlane brought him on. Given the situation and given what John Cooney's done for Ulster and how well he's played the last, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, to bring Nathan Doak on at that time when the game was on a knife edge, to back him like that, and for Nathan Doak to he delivered. It wasn't just him by himself, but for him to drive the team on to get the win says an awful lot about his credentials and what Dan McFarlane thinks of his credentials.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I think Fiona's had to go. You're gone, Fiona?
No, I'm here.
Oh, are you? You have to run. What are you're coaching at the moment, are you? Do you have to run?
No, I'm all good. Sorry, it was just there was my phone just dropped there. So yeah, no, I'm here. I'm all good. I'm coaching in Bruff in a while, but not till 6:30. So
Okay.
we're all good.
Well, I won't keep you a minute or two then. So, Connacht get the unlucky draw now of Leinster off the back of a defeat. So they can anticipate, I think, fairly fired up Leinster. But for Connacht, 46 points to 18 win against Ospreys, atrocious conditions. And they obviously beat Ulster in round 5. So they're beginning to almost, a bit like Ulster making amends for their slip-up, they're beginning to make amends for their slip-up against, I think, wasn't it Dragons, the sports ground, earlier in the season. And they're just a joy to watch, and that should be a really good game on Friday. What did you see from Connacht against the Ospreys?
Yeah, they're just exciting. I mean, it was close enough up to, I suppose, about the 60th minute, but I just thought when Connacht took off, they're just their usual selves. The play that they're doing. I mean, with Conor Oliver doing offloads, Paul Boyle, big carries. They're just dominating the tackle area, but also you have the forwards involved outside the main areas. We're seeing people standing up as first receivers. It's working really well for them, and I think Jack Carty again, another really, really good game for him. I thought he was exciting to watch. They're just brilliant, and I think I'm really, really looking forward to this game for next weekend against Leinster. I think Leinster might have, because they are obviously going to be looking at their physicality. We've spoken about the lack of physicality sometimes when it comes to the big games, and they were out-muscled by Ulster. So I think they'll be approaching this game very, very different. But if Connacht can get quick ball, we can see what they can do in those wide channels. I mean, how good is Mac Hansen, lads? He's absolutely brilliant to watch.
Because it is worth reminding people, I mean, I'm sure Connacht fans haven't forgotten, but they did win at the RDS last season in January, 35 points to 24. Jack Carty was amazing, you remember. So, that's in their back pocket as well, Darren. But, you can just imagine the Leinster training this week.
Yeah, and actually, I thought that actually when France were playing the All Blacks a couple of weeks back, I thought, what a terrible time to get them, after Ireland have just given them a beating, but that theory was proved wrong. But I definitely think, it's shocking time to play Leinster with Leo Collins' comments, but imagine they're training right now. And for Connacht, it's just about consistency. Some of the rugby I've seen from Connacht this year has been absolutely spectacular in terms of the style of play and the quality. I think it was the Bulls game at the sports ground earlier in the year, obviously the Ulster game, and then at the weekend it's just their ability to play in those conditions is just phenomenal. I hadn't seen Bolton before. I hadn't seen McNulty before. Some of the lines of running, I just thought, and I've only seen Mac Hansen every time I flick on highlights and he's running drives from the halfway line. For them, it's consistency, because they are capable of really, really great things, and it's really exciting for Irish rugby because all 4 provinces are all over it at the minute.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, guys, we're pretty much out of time. So, Fiona, you're doing a coaching session, did you say in Bruff?
I am. I'm out in Bruff with the Bull Hayes' wife. I'm helping her out with the underage tonight, so I'm looking forward to that.
Brilliant. So
I won't be giving him any scrummaging tips now. I'm sure he's done enough of that, so I won't contradict him.
very good.
Joe, I'm away to Bath, 2 screaming toddlers. I wish I was going to coach him.
Yeah, I see. I was going to say, so Fiona's out there giving back in the wind and the rain, contributing to the grassroots. I was like, what's Cave doing for the afternoon?
Yeah, it's bath time's about 6:30, so I'm happy to chat here for another hour if you're about, Joe.
No.
And you have to go, and you have to look after that tash, giving all brush as well, Darren, don't you?
Yeah, tidying myself up a wee bit.
Do you oil that thing? You do?
I have before, and I have a wee comb for it, but yeah, listen, a midlife crisis, I don't care. Look at the state of me.
No, listen, it looks fantastic. Radio listeners, you've missed out, is all I can say. Darren Cave, thanks so much for making time. Do appreciate it. And Fiona Hayes, thanks again. We'll talk soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.